In the dark, one moon circles. Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Night Terrors, which is episode 17 of season 4 of Star Trek Next Generation. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Next Generation one episode at a time. In this video I cover the 4th season episode Night Terrors. So Night Terrors is the episode where the crew discovers a Starfleet ship where everyone had died. They had killed each other apparently, and then they discovered they're stuck in what is called a Tychon's Rift and they don't have the material to get out. But on top of that, the crew are starting to go insane and become really highly irritable, and so what happened on the other ship has a risk of happening on the Enterprise, and Dr. Crusher finds out it's because it's due to lack of REM sleep. Well, meanwhile, Troy is the only one who can sleep, but she experienced nightmares. It's finally determined that there's another alien ship also trapped in the Tychon's Rift, and they're attempting to telepathically communicate with Counselor Troy. However, their communications are blocking REM sleep for the rest of the crew. However, eventually they find out what the aliens want, and they're able to work together to cause an explosion for both ships to leave, and Troy then goes in her dreams to communicate to the alien to coordinate the escape, which works, and the crew all return to normal. So with this episode, it's an episode that I always found mediocre. It's one of the episodes I had seen a bunch of times because it was in season 4. But it had been a while since I've seen it. I do remember I put this in my top 10 creepiest episodes. It was sort of my Halloween special where I ranked the creepiest episodes of Star Trek, and this was in my top 10. In fact, I've seen it on several other people's like scary or Halloween or horror episodes of Star Trek. I think Jeremy Johns did one, and it was in his top 10 as well, if I'm remembering correctly. So it is well noted as a horror episode, and when I watched it just now for this review, I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. I was actually, it improved for me, and there's many aspects that I appreciated on this last rewatch, which I'll get into shortly. But then I did some research and found out that a lot of people hate this episode, particularly those who worked on this episode. Marina Sirtis, I think, is the only exception who really liked it, but she hated doing the flying effects because she has an intense fear of heights, and so them lifting her up on these wire suspensions was terrible. She said the fear on her face was real. But she actually liked the plot because she said she was into dream stuff. Riker, or Jonathan Frakes, I should say, hated this episode. He thought called it a yawn fest. Michael Piller thought it was a failure. Jerry Taylor thought it was a failure. Rick Berman said it didn't quite work. And the director, Les Landau, apparently refuses to talk about this episode. And so, not only that, but a lot of the fans apparently didn't like it. I watched and read a lot of reviews, as I normally do, and most of them were like really negative on this episode. And there was one review I watched, though, when they said it was one of their favorite episodes of Star Trek, and I'm like, whoa. So it does seem like people were split on this episode, although there was a lot of negativity for it. And yeah, I think Michael Piller, someone attached with the show, said it was the worst episode of season 4, which, come on, nowhere near like the loss exists. So, and it's funny because there's two kind of horror themed episodes back to back. This and the episode I'll cover next, Identity Crisis. And Well, from the reviews I watched and read, it seems to be consensus that Identity Crisis is the better episode, and I completely disagree. I'll get into Identity Crisis next time, but I think this episode is much better, personally. So, first of all, I think when I did my top 10 creepy episodes, I specifically called it creepy and not like horror or not scary, because I'm not really a fan of horror. And whenever there's a straight up horror episode like Impact Nor on D Space Nine or Impulse on Enterprise, to me those are two stereotypical horror, and they follow all the tropes and cliches of horror films, and so I don't like them. Particularly in Pak Nor was the episode where they went to another Cardassian space station. There was these Cardassian super killers who were going around murdering all the yellow shirts. Because this is DS9, they're yellow shirts instead of red shirts, but they might as well have been red shirts. And I just hate the red shirt cliche. And then Garrick caught the virus and he became murdering as well. Like, yeah, I really didn't like that episode. I do apologize to Kyrie091 who loves that episode. I really didn't like it. And Impulse and Enterprise is the one where the Vulcan zombies. That's really pretty much all I have to say. It was kind of ripping off the feel of 28 Days Later with the fast-moving zombies and the shaky cam. And it was like, kind of had a Event Horizon feel to it as well. But yeah, I don't like those episodes. I'm not a fan of horror, so I don't like horror episodes. Don't even get me started on all the cheesy schlock that was in the original series, like Man Trap. Like, I can't stand stuff like that. So what I like is the episodes that are creepy rather than straight out horror. The ones that make you feel uneasy or creepy. And that's applies to me for movies as well. It's the kind of horror movies I prefer. It's not the straight out slasher films or monster going around killing people. It's the creepy and the eerie stuff. And this is what I think this episode does very well. And one of the common complaints I heard about this episode is that it is too slow. But I didn't actually find it slow. It does have one of the most noted horror scenes, or the creepiest scene, which a lot of people point out to. Even those who don't like this episode will say, well, no, that was a good scene. Was the scene where Dr. Crusher was in the morgue surrounded by dead bodies, and she turned around and all of a sudden all the dead bodies were sitting up upright. That was, yeah, I think that might be the creepiest scene in all of Star Trek. And then she had to sort of just be like, go away. So yeah, I think it was a very effective horror, or creepy I should say, episode. But one thing universally a lot of people complain about is the Troy floating and flying through the clouds in her dreams. Several people like Jonathan Frakes and I think Michael Piller or Jerry Taylor pointed to that specifically on why the episode failed, that this calling those sequences horrible. And many reviewers had pointed that out, saying that it looks absolutely terrible and it's fake and it's cheesy and dumb. In fact, there was a couple of YouTubers I was watching who both considered this to be one of the worst episodes of the show, specifically for those sequences, saying how ridiculous it was for Troy to be flying through the air going, "Where are you?" But I don't know, for whatever reason, I never found that to be terrible. It's fine for me. And yeah, the green screen work is kind of shoddy, but it's not the worst. I've seen much worse, probably on Star Trek. It's not even that bad. I don't think it looks that cheesy. I don't know why. I just don't have a problem with it. I think Star Trek has done, even the Next Generation has done much worse and much more cheesier things than that. So I just never had a problem with it. I think it conveys, like, the whole eyes in the dark thing where he's just repeating eyes in the dark. That was effectively creepy. Like, that was creepy shit, and it was eerie and it was strange. It had that. And this is what Marina Sirtis liked. She liked the exploration of the dream world, and it had that abstract, dreamy. Like most dreams sequences that are done on television and movies don't feel like dreams. They're just like real life with white clouds or a smoke machine or whatever. Whereas dreams are really in real life are really abstract and strange, and so this, I think, captured that feeling of a very bizarre dream, and so I actually like it. I'll defend it. Maybe people will get on my case about it, but I didn't have any problems with these scenes, and I thought they were actually kind of good. You know, the episode I would compare this to that was actually really cheesy was the Voyager episode, The Fight, which, if you watch my top 10 worst episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise, The Fight was number 2 on my list of the worst episodes of the franchise. And when I did the review for that episode, I even pointed out that it was basically just regurgitating the plot of this episode. That was kind of a revelation for me. I didn't notice it and realize it until I sat down and analyzed the episode in detail, and I started to realize that this is just the plot of Night Terrors, but done way, way, way worse. And it's not like Night Terrors is an amazing episode in itself, so it seems like a weird episode to emulate. And I'm sorry, like Chakotay fighting people in the boxing match in order to communicate with aliens to go, "You are in this space, you will be destroyed," is a billion times cheesier than Troy floating in space. I'll take Troy floating in space any day of the week over that stupid, like that boxing bullshit. When they had like clips of all the different characters and, you know, strung together to make sentences like, "You are in chaotic space." Like that, I was laughing hysterically just how terrible that was. It was one of the funniest episodes in terms of so bad. I don't want to say so bad it's good, because it's not good. It's hilarious, but it's just hilarious. As Data would point out to Law, I was laughing at the episode, not with it. It's just so bad, but basically it's the plot of Night Terrors, because it's slightly different. It's a variation, because in Night Terrors the whole crew starts to go insane because of alien interference, or telepathic interference, whereas in The Fight, it's just Chakotay who goes insane, so not the entire crew, just one person. And in Night Terrors, it's a ship trying to communicate with the Enterprise so they can both get out of this space that they're stuck in. But in Voyager, it's the aliens communicating with Voyager are not stuck in the space. They live there, but they can recognize that Voyager is stuck there and that it would be destroyed unless they move, so they try to communicate with Voyager, and doing so causes Chakotay to go insane. So there's variations, but it's very similar. But as I said, done much, much worse. And the one thing I will say about this episode that I really noticed, that I really liked this time around, was, I said before how the writers often don't know how to write for Troy, and she often doesn't have much to do, and her Betazoid abilities are often ignored, and people just don't write her very well. And I said that I will point out the episodes where she actually was utilized or written for very well, and this is one of them. This is when I noted that I think people are stuck in that whole dream sequence thing, which again I don't have an issue with, I actually really like. But even outside of that, like, this is a good episode for her. She comes across as being very competent and good at her job. I'm thinking particularly of the scene with Worf trying to commit suicide, which I love that scene. I think that's a really good scene. I think Marita Sirtis does an amazing job, and it's just written well. Like, Troy actually comes across as really competent and really concerned for Worf, and she knows, like, she's able to calmly, talk him down. And I, by the way, totally buy Worf's reaction here. I know some other people had issues with it. I don't. I think it makes sense because Worf is under the same going insane or going crazy just like everyone else. And so I think it makes sense that he would just be ashamed of being so fearful and would try to kill himself. And Troy has to let him know, because he's like, oh, there's something trying to kill us and I'm not strong enough to stop it. And Troy has to calmly point out that no, it's just an illusion, nothing is coming to get you. And then she grabs his hand after he puts the knife down and slowly walks him out. Like, that was a really touching moment. Like, that was a very, very good Troy moment. I love that scene. I think it was really good. And just overall, I think Troy came off as a fully, well-written character. And again, her Betazoid abilities were focused on, because that was the focus of the episode, is that these aliens trying to communicate with her telepathically, and she has to go in and communicate with the aliens. Now, the one issue I did have with the dream sequences was in the end, where Data, they had to coordinate doing that explosion. Data says the only message you need to convey is now. So why doesn't she go in there and say now? Instead, she keeps going like, where are you? I need to find you to tell you. And she just repeats that over and over again. I'm like, just fucking say, yeah, we're ready. Do the explosion now. We got your message. We're good to go. Instead of saying that, she's like, where are you? So that part didn't really make any sense. But I did like when the alien did finally appear to her and go and do the strange form. Oh, and by the way, the music is really good in this episode. I believe I did have this in my honorable mentions of best music episodes of The Next Generation. This is Ron Jones, to give him credit where credit is due, because I don't always. But yeah, it was really iconic music. Now, they do just repeat that theme a lot to the episode, but it works. But then you have that musical cue when the alien appears to Troy in the dream. Like, it was very, so shocking. I also like the fact that Data had to become acting captain. Like, that was cool to see. And that the crew basically had to put their lives in the hands of Data. And I think that really worked. I like it when Data is given more to do and given power. And I kind of like the scenes how everyone kept forgetting what they're saying and going and Data had to finish their sentences for them. It was really good, and seeing Crusher sort of battle with this while she's trying to combat or figure out what's going on with the crew. That was that was really good. And you got a couple of creepy moments, like Riker seeing the snakes in the bed and Picard freaking out on the turbo lift when it was, or the whole thing with the door chime going doot and no one is there. Yeah, I don't know. I think I liked it. I think it was effectively creepy and had really nice touches to it. And I think the final solution, that it was actually aliens trying to communicate with them, they worked together to get out, was really good. Now, one question I always had, and I wasn't very clear, is in the final scene, after they destroyed the Titan's rift and the Enterprise moves off, we see something fly past the Enterprise. I always thought when I first saw this episode that it was the alien ship. But then I realized that maybe it was just debris, because it does kind of look like a rock or something. So it could have just been debris, but it was like glowing. So maybe, I don't know, for me it would have been more interesting if it was an alien ship, if that was the alien ship. Because I expected to see the alien ship, because there was an alien ship also trapped in there. And they're really alien, not just being, humans with bumps on their foreheads. So that's another thing that I give this episode credit for. Now, I remember watching this episode with my mother when I was much younger, and she's saying that the premise of this episode was bullshit, because she was saying that she never reaches REM sleep, or has had a condition where she was never reaching REM sleep for a while. And so she's like, and she doesn't go insane because of that. And she's saying a lot of people, and she was a nurse, so she was telling me a lot of people don't reach REM sleep, and it doesn't cause them to go insane, that this episode was BS. And it's funny because I read a quote from Rick Berman, who said, "Oh, this is actually true. This is what would actually happen if people didn't reach REM sleep." And I'm like, is it though? So I Googled it and looked up what Google had to say about it, and it says, studies of a few rare individuals who do not experience REM sleep show that they do not experience problems with memory or learning. That said, REM sleep deprivation disrupts the brain's ability to generate new cells. More research is needed to better understand the effects of REM sleep deprivation. So in other words, it seems like they don't really know. Like, they need more studies to find out. But a lot of people apparently already, like my mom, get by just fine without REM sleep. So it makes me not buy the premise of the episode. And in fact, I heard it suggested that they should have just said it was sleep deprivation, because that's actually something that's proven that sleep deprivation can cause. Maybe not, you wouldn't go insane and start killing people, but you would definitely become highly irritated and agitated. But anywho, one scene I really, really didn't like about this episode, and to me was the cheesy scene, and it's not the Troy flying. I think that was fine. It was the scene in 10 Forward where we kept going back to O'Brien talking to this guy, and this guy is like being a dick and like, oh, they're doing experiments on us and blah blah blah. I guess this is there to show that the crew are going a bit insane. But then you have the moment where bar fight breaks out, and guy gets a phaser rifle and shoots it into the air. That was so dumb. That was really, really dumb. Why? I don't know. It didn't need to be there, and it was just cheesy, and it seemed really cheesy. It brought the cheese factor into this episode, which otherwise I think it was actually creepy, so it just interferes with that creepy feeling. I don't know why they had to have it, and apparently I was going to say maybe they were short on time, but apparently they weren't, because I read that the episode was actually 9 minutes over, and they had to cut out 9 minutes of the script before they shot it. So why are they wasting time with this bullshit with Guinan? It's just, I don't know, maybe Whoopi Goldberg was available, and so they decided to use her. I don't know. That's something I never really liked. I also wanted to talk about Ensign Rager, is one of the ensigns that appear as the helmsman. They have all these recycling helmsmen after Wesley left, and I thought she was in a whole bunch of episodes. I thought I remember seeing her in like 20 episodes or so, and I looked it up, and she's only in 4. That really surprised me. So Galaxy's Quest, not Galaxy Quest, Galaxy's Child was the first episode she appeared in. This was the second, and then she was also in Relics in season 6, so skipped a year, and then Schisms. I remember very clearly her being in Relics. And I remember her from Schisms because that's when she was like one of the people who was trapped in that pocket reality, and Riker had to rescue her. So she actually had a kind of an important role in that episode, which apparently was the last episode she appeared in. And here, she, I don't know if I remembered this, but she has a memorable moment because Picard gives her an order and she doesn't know how to. She's like, "Oh, I forgot how to do this," and Riker has to relieve her of duty and get another dude to take her place. So, yeah, for some reason I thought she appeared in a lot of episodes, not just 4. That seems to be a occurrence with a lot of these ensigns. And one of my revisiteds, I talked about Ensign McKnight, who I remembered very clearly. I thought she was in at least 10 episodes, and she was only in 3. But I'll talk more about her when we get to her only second appearance, which is in theory. But anywho, so I would like to thank all my Patreon supporters that support me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does help me continue with my channel. I want to give a very special shout out to Brandon Neal House. Thank you so very much for your support. And I'll also give a shout out to Antarius, Greg Marley, Francisco Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky Metagester, Joel Files, Alessandra Megalicio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So, we do have a few patron comments on this episode. Just waiting for the page to load so I can bring it up here. Let's see. Night Terrors. Okay, so first comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, "Eyes in the dark, one moon circles." So this was actually was the episode that made me become a rabid fan of Trek. Yes, this one. I think the whole sequence of Picard and the door chimes were part of it, but of course it was the scariest moment of all Trek, where no CGI or special effects were used, when Crusher's in the morgue and all the bodies in the sheets sit up. And I'm not even a horror movie fan. This episode relies on unique Trek and uses a whole Federation / Starfleet backstory of the Titan's Rift to create the actual dilemma, combined with the mysterious telepathic aliens and a full Betazoid man who is catatonic to further enhance the mystery. Given that CGI may have been needed for Troy's dreams, where the wires effect was borderline comical, and Riker's hallucination of the snakes and even Picard's of the turbolift was a bit much, especially since it was more powerful with the door chime for him. And it's those issues that get more in the way. And no effort of communication with the other alien ship once they were released. Were they in such a rush to meet up with Captain Fraser? Given that, O'Brien's jealousy of Keiko was a lot more buyable and relatable than any scenes with Neelix and Kes, and Guinan's moment with the big Bertha gun into the air were good moments for going beyond the regular crew. I've given it an 8 in the past. I still do. I can forgive some of the clumsy effects, and I truly feel that the overall eerie experience and memorable melody music refrain that enhances it are good. 8 sheeted corpses sitting upright to a bewildered, sleep-deprived Crusher out of 10. Yeah, I agree. Suppose again, I didn't really have that big of an issue with the Troy sequences. I had more of an issue with the Guinan thing, but yeah, I think it was an effectively creepy episode. So next comment is from Antarius, who says, "This is a good episode to watch on Halloween. Not the cat's paw crap from TOS. Until now, I tended to disagree with Mark's opinion on Ron Jones, but in this episode, especially in the teaser, I totally see what he means. I like how the script integrated Miles and Keiko in this story, although I don't buy the connection between his dreamlessness, sorry if there's no word like that in English, it's not my first language, and his sudden jealousy. The decline of Picard's mental abilities is far more realistic. I can't believe the aliens are not able to produce hydrogen. This seems very contrived. If Typhon was able to cause such a powerful explosion, these elements should be basis for new weapons against the Borg. Nevertheless, a good mystery episode with some memorable and even funny scenes. My rating is a 7 out of 10. That's a good point about the Borg. I did forget to mention that, how they used the deflector dish. They called back to the Best of Both Worlds where they tried to use the deflector dish against the Borg, and that's what they used here. I don't know why, but I forgot about that. I never even noticed that they were referencing Best of Both Worlds. The other thing I wanted to mention about Norman Buckwald's comment was the Betazoid guy who was catatonic, because I just looked it up and I had no idea this is the same actor who played Rousseau on D Space Nine in this final arc towards the end of the show. That Cardassian asshole who was trying to kill Kira. I'd never realized that was him, because I did recognize that actor. He was also in Babylon 5 quite a bit, played a character called Naroon. I had no idea this was the guy here playing the Betazoid, so that was interesting to find that out. So next comment is from Greg Marley, who says, I for one have a soft spot for this episode. It's not nearly as dire as some people say it is. Makes good use of Deanna's abilities, and I think Marita Sirtis does well. It's always interesting to me when we see the crew displaying imperfections or acting like regular people, and here we see that even they get irritated and impatient after not getting any sleep, just like us. I also really like the scene where Picard takes Data aside because he's the only one not subject to sleeplessness, and good old reliable Data just says yes, he will do what needs to be done when the time comes. It's a great moment that heightens the sense of danger and is a cool reminder of how indispensable Data would actually be in so many types of danger or disaster. I do think that is something that Next Gen falls back on quite a lot, actually, is the whole Data is the only one not affected. For it is a trope they do a lot. In the original series it was Spock. I mean, it works, particularly for this episode. It is good seeing him being in charge while the rest of the crew sort of loses their mind. So next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, while I was watching the scene with Picard on the bridge, in a way I was looking at myself. I was trying to stay awake, and it wasn't because I didn't like this episode. I have insomnia, so I only get about 2 hours of sleep per night, and once a week I may get 4 hours. I don't remember my dreams. If you enter REM sleep after 90 minutes of sleep, absolutely fecked. I don't know how true that is. I did see this online. REM sleep first occurs about 90 minutes after falling asleep. I did dream once when I was normal. Now I believe I am a real-life zombie who is still alive. People who ask me how do I function with hardly no sleep, I guess I'm just used to it by now. I do, however, take power naps, but I'm still awake and only resting my eyes after 20 minutes of this, I'm wide awake again. Which strangely felt like being stoned for the first and only time, as I experienced that over in Amsterdam, my brother bachelor party. I have this problem for at least the 25 years, and it seems I'm losing an hour of sleep per decade. Sometimes in my 60s I will go insane like the good people from the Britain. Worf is way better in Deep Space Nine. He just gives up and tries to end his life. What a pussy. I will keep an eye on this. No spoilers of what I'm keeping an eye on. Riker is only in the first 20 minutes of the episode, and we see him again briefly on the bridge. I wonder what he was doing during this time. Maybe he was writing letters to all of his lovers from previous episodes to explain why he can't do any more booty calls with them. My rating is 7. If someone tells me 7 hours of sleep is not enough time for sleep per night, and try to get about 16 per week and come moon at me. And REM sleep is a myth or an urban legend, but they're a great band out of 10. Yeah, I am so sorry to hear that. That sounds insane. That sounds terrible. It sounds like the guy from Fight Club who couldn't sleep. I have a problem with insomnia too, but what happens is I just wake up in the middle of the night and then go back to sleep, and then I end up sleeping in very late. So I feel like I'm spending my whole day sleeping or trying to sleep. But the thing with me is, and I know you said you don't like people complaining that 7 hours isn't enough. Jesus Christ. But for me, and this is just the way I am and my condition, I guess everyone else is different, but if I don't get 6 hours of sleep in the night, in the middle of the day, I'll literally will not be able to breathe. I will, maybe it has to do with my heart condition, but I'll start hyperventilating, and I lose all energy. I always compared it to Superman with when someone put a kryptonite gun or something and it just zapped his energy. That's what I feel like. I feel like my energy is being completely zapped and I can't move or function. I become kind of paralyzed and I can't even breathe. And so no matter what I'm doing or where I am, I have to lie down to sleep, otherwise I'll hyperventilate. That's only if I get less than 6 hours of sleep that happens. So that's, that is my condition. That is the thing with me. So I can't imagine how he could have gotten by so long with only 2 hours of sleep at night. But I guess it's like you said, you got used to it. But still, oh my God, that sounds terrible. But anyway, I addressed the REM sleep thing and how I think that's kind of bullshit with this episode. But yes, REM is a good band. I was going to mention that. One thing confession I have to make is this episode is when I first heard of REM sleep. I had no idea what REM stood for until I saw this episode, and that's what made it clear. Oh, well, that's where the band gets its name. But yeah, whenever I watch this episode, I'm always thinking, that's me in the corner. That's me in the spot. Anyway, let's see what's coming up next. Man, my cat's crazy. They're just jumping across the thing like that. Made me lose my spot. Hold on, give me a second. Alright, so the next comment is from Brandon Neal Howells, who says, Night Terrors, shades of The Naked Time, but nowhere near as interesting. John Vickery, who played Naroon so well in Babylon 5, is totally wasted as a mostly catatonic Vulcan. I am still not entirely sure what this episode is about. I cannot get over Troy floating in gray clouds. Picard gets a few good moments, and why are they leaving Data in charge of the ship again, given his past record? Did anyone else notice that the protein is misspelled on the model of the ship? I feel I've seen this premise done before on at least one occasion. I do like Beverly in the morgue, though. Oh well, at least it's not quite as bad as Impulse Shrug. 4 Guidons with guns from Buck Rogers in the 25th century out of 10. Yeah, that rifle she pulled out looks terrible. But I guess you also noticed that Naroon was in this episode. Although he didn't play a Vulcan, he played a catatonic Betazoid. But, whatever, same thing. Both telepathic. Anyway, yeah, so, yeah, you seem a bit more negative than the other Patreon supporters. But, yeah, it is similar to the Naked Time. It actually reminded me more of the Naked Now. The way to discover the ship with everyone sort of dead on it. And this is much better than the Naked Now. I will say that. At least. So anyway, we got another comment from Stephen Kennedy. He says, as I said in my previous comment, I don't dream. Well, unless I dream the same every night. That I dream that I can't sleep every night, that would be a terrible thing to dream about. I did run an experiment over a few days. I usually go to bed around 10 p.m. and I used to get up around 12. If I couldn't sleep, I would stay up for about an hour, and yes, I feel bloody tired the next day. So the next 2 nights, I wouldn't get up, and I found that I felt okay the next day. So with not much sleep, at least I was resting in bed. That is how I survived with lack of sleep. The second part of this experiment is that I get up early, about 2 hours before I leave for work, as I need to be wide awake. Yeah, that just sounds awful. Now, the funny thing is, and I was just thinking about this, yesterday I had surgery for my heart. It wasn't like open heart surgery or anything that complicated. But anyway, it was a procedure, and I was on anesthesia, knocked out for like 4 hours. I think that's the longest I've ever been knocked out, and I've been having a lot of procedures lately. But the funny thing is, and the reason why I bring it up is because I believe when you're knocked out by anesthesia, it's not considered sleep. Like, it's not restful. But this happened this time and the time before, like last time I had a surgery. I dreamed. So I must have, once the anesthesia fell off, or wore off, I must have fell asleep. It must have been asleep because I was dreaming. And usually I don't dream. Like the first couple of surgeries, or first couple of times I was on anesthesia, it felt like no time had passed. It's like they're putting the mask over my head, and the next thing I know, I'm waking up in recovery. It's like no time has passed. It's like instant. However, the last 2 times, and especially yesterday, I actually dreamed first. So they put me under, and then I had a very vivid dream, and then I woke up in recovery. So in both cases, I must have fallen asleep after the anesthesia wore off, but that must mean like I dreamed instantly, because I could imagine I couldn't have been asleep for that long. So the dream, and they're very strong and vivid as well, so I don't know if that was anesthesia produced or whatever, but it's an interesting thing to think about. Anyway, getting off these tangents about our sleep issues, but anyway, I hope I didn't annoy you, Stephen, by complaining about my sleep issues, because it might seem very minor compared to yours, because I still get a lot of sleep each night. But yeah, I don't know. It probably has to do with my heart condition. But anywho, thank you so much, patrons, for your comments. So my rating for Night Terrors out of 10 is going to be a 7. Very good. Yeah, I think this is a good episode. It's much better than I think a lot of people give it credit for. I think it's effectively creepy. Everyone talks about that Crusher scene, even those who don't like this episode. But I think throughout is really creepy. And I love the scene with Troy and Worf, actually. I think that's a really good, powerful scene. And I think overall they use Troy well in this episode, which is not a common thing. They use Data well in this episode, which I think was very good. It might be a bit on the slow side. So it's not, for me, it's not strong enough to give an 8. Or especially not a 9-2, but I think it is a good episode. It is effectively creepy and very interesting, and I think it's a much better horror episode than the next episode that I'll get to, but I'll explain that when I get to that episode. Anyway, so that's it for my review of Night Terrors. So let's see what's coming up next on my channel. If this document will show up. Everything is loading very slowly. Let's see, where are we at? Night Terrors. So yeah, well, obviously I keep alluding to this episode. Monday will be my review for Identity Crisis, and Wednesday will be my review for the Nth Degree. Thursday, back with another Star Trek Discovery review. And then Saturday will be May the 4th, so you know what that means. Back for another Star Wars movie review. This time, Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. So that's what's coming up on my channel, so be sure to check that out as I continue to cover Star Trek and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.